So I think, in my experience, there are lots of awakened people out there who just don't really understand what's happened to them. So they need a supportive framework which will, enable them to integrate that into their lives and enable them to accept it fully.
And that integration can be quite hard, can't it?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it took a few years before I was able to. It's a long process of searching. Slowly you find like-minded people who understand spirituality. If you're lucky, you'll meet a spiritual teacher who can guide you.
So your way, when you say it took you time to do that, your way was to try and find like-minded people to share the experience and get advice from. Is that right?
Yeah, but it wasn't really a conscious thing. I sort of slowly stumbled towards like-minded people, or events happened which seemed to guide me towards like-minded people. But even then, I mean, once I really did understand what was happening, it still took me a few years before I was able to sort of get into a sort of fairly balanced state to integrate the spiritual area of my being with other aspects of my being. I quite like Ken Wilber's integral idea, the idea that in order for spiritual development to be fully established and fully balanced, you have to work in parallel with other areas of the being. You have to develop intellectually, socially, emotionally at the same time. So if you become a monk or a hermit, you're placing all your energy and all the energy of your being into spiritual development, which is fine, but it's going to lead you into an unbalanced state, and it may mean that the spiritual state you develop is not properly balanced and may not last for a long time. You may not be able to sustain it. But if you develop in other areas in parallel, then it's more likely that your spiritual state will be more balanced and that you'll sustain it it'll become permanent. I think what I found was that my spiritual state couldn't become permanent because it was offset by a lack of development in other areas, and I had for a long time low self-esteem, lack of self-confidence. I didn't feel as I could function in ordinary society. So those factors kind of worked against my, sort of working towards a stable spiritual state.
I know you wrote a book, I think it was called The Fall, previous to Waking from Sleep, and there you talk about this feeling that people have of incompleteness. And because of that incompleteness, that drives them to try and find the completeness on the outside rather than more on the inside. I thought that was very interesting. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I mentioned before that one of my aims in my work is to try to understand the normal human psyche. And I think if you look at the normal human psyche, you'll find it has a certain number of characteristics. One of them is it exists in a state of separateness. I call it ego isolation. That because we experience ourselves as egos enclosed in our own mental space, in our own heads, we experience a duality. The world seems to be out there, other people seem to be out there, and therefore we're kind of alone. Fundamentally, we experience ourselves as alone within our own mental space. So it's quite a negative state to be in, this state of aloneness. And also, the normal human psyche exists in a state of disturbance too. There's a constant disturbance of thought chatter, random worries and daydreams, anxieties that just flow automatically through our consciousness. So because of this, I think the normal human psyche exists in a state of discord and discontent. So because of this, we seek to complete ourselves in the outside world. We feel incomplete or somehow insignificant, and therefore we seek significance and completeness in the outside world. So that could be through, obviously a lot of people do it through money. We try to gain wealth to make ourselves feel more secure, more complete. And we try to gain status and success in order to feel more significant, to try to offset this innate sense of insignificance. And I think on a social level, these desires can be very dangerous. This sense of incompleteness and the desire for wealth and status and power that it gives, I think ultimately they give rise to warfare throughout human history. They give rise to lots of different forms of social oppression, like male domination, and different classes and different castes in society. So on a social level, it can be very dangerous indeed.
So in a way, these awakening experiences are trying to show us the futility of finding this completeness on the outside. These really come together, these two things.
Yeah.
That we somehow, at this level of the mind, we can never find fullness, never find oneness, but and I do it myself, I know that sometimes as well, we keep trying to do it somehow. We believe it's going to work here, but it's never going to work there. It's something else
No.
that's always there and available, and it's finding a way to find that, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, in awakening experiences, we lose that separateness. We step beyond our own egos, and our identity spreads out into the whole world, so that we lose the impulse to gain wealth and success and power. We don't need to dominate other people anymore because we feel one with the world. We lose discontent and discord.
And do you feel in society we're moving generally the right way or the wrong way at the moment? Are we getting nearer to rediscovering who we really are, or are we getting more and more involved in the struggle of the ego? What do you think?
Well, I think there are opposing trends. I think if you look back over the last few thousand years of human history, it's been a sort of tale of endless chaos, disorder, endless conflict, endless suffering on an individual level, suffering on a social level, a really sort of bleak and catastrophic history. But I do think particularly over the past 300 years, I think there's been a major change. I think if you look back to the 18th century, I think the 18th century was quite a significant time in human history, especially towards the end. There was this, in the fall, I explain it as this sense that human beings were stepping beyond their own egos, they were stepping beyond separateness. So suddenly there was this sort of new wave of compassion and empathy which spread to other human beings, to other species. So at the end of the 18th century you get this anti-slavery movement, the beginning of the women's rights movement, the animal rights movement. Suddenly punishments for criminals become a lot less harsh. There's this sort of movement beyond brutality towards compassion. And I think that's continued over the past 300 years. And it's meant that we become more integrated with our own bodies as well, so we get more sexual openness, less hostility towards the body. But maybe most markedly over the past 100 years, there's been a massive upsurge in interest in self-development, spirituality, also a reconnection to nature too, with the ecology, environmental movements. So I think there's this major evolutionary movement in the human psyche that is moving us towards oneness, beyond separateness and towards oneness.
So somehow we're getting there in our own way.
Yeah.
Steve, we need to finish now. Really appreciate you coming in. Just to remind people again, Steve Teller's book, Waking from Sleep. It really is an interesting read, and it was an interesting chat. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks a lot.
And I hope we see you on Conscious TV again soon. Goodbye.